As usual, we start with a few words to be mechasek myself as well as others. We stand now in the time of Bein HaMeitzarim, and we're heading towards Chodesh Av. Very shortly, Shabbos is going to be Chodesh Av. Hagoyin Rabbi Gedalia Shah says, why is Chodesh Av called Chodesh Av? The names of the Chadoshim came from Bovel. Why is Chodesh Av? Chodesh Av is when Klal Yisrael had difficult times. Churban Bayis Rishon, Bayis Sheni, and many other tzaros on Tisha B'Av. The 9 days. And it's easy for a person to feel chas v'shalom deserted. Hashem is not looking after me. Hashem is not interested in me. This is the month that we call Chodesh Av. It's true that sometimes we go through a difficult patch in life. It's true that life has its ups and its downs, but the downs are also part of the rachmim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a Chodesh Av. Reb Shimon Shvab Zechron Levrocha says, the Gemara says, Mishenichnas of Mematim B'Simcha. It doesn't say there's no Simcha. We tone down the Simcha. There's less Simcha, but there's always a base level of Simcha. A Simcha in the fact that we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one. If there's a slap in the face, if something happens to me as an individual, to my family, to a Kehillah, to Klal Yisrael in general, it comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That level of Simcha is there. Even on Tisha B'Av, we have to know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu deals with us from his wonderful kesher, his fatherly love, which sometimes manifests itself in a way that we appreciate, and sometimes it's in a way when life is more difficult, but it's still his fatherly love. Sisu ito mosois kolam is ablim oleho. Says the Zlotsheva Magid, kolam is ablim oleho. At the moment when you are misabel on the Churban Yerushalayim, sisu ito mosois. Together with it, you should be happy. Together with difficulty in life, you should know that it comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love. Sisu ito mosois. HaMisablim oleho. At the time of the misablim, nobody should be misabel on his own life. But sometimes we have nisyonos. Sisu ito mosois. Be aware of the fact that it comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's everlasting love. Avas oilom avtich. Rabbi Dessler says, why is it that Chazal tell us Mashiach is born on Tisha B'Av itself? You shouldn't think that Tisha B'Av is just to hit you. Tisha B'Av is there that we should grow, that we should get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We were sent to this world to overcome the nisyonos and be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if we don't take care of it ourselves to make sure we come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then there's a patch in the face. But it's all there in order that Mashiach should be born from the difficulty that we go through. Immediately after Tisha B'Av, immediately after the Klosa de Puranusa, which we find ourselves in, straight away comes the Shiva de Nechemta. There's no one Shabbos in between, because it's a direct outgrowth. One leads to the other. In fact, the first Haftarah after Tisha B'Av, Nachamu Nachamu Ami, Yoimar Elokeichem, says the Medrash in Parshas Vayechi. Yosef says to his brothers, Atem chashavtem olai ra. You thought, you intended that this is going to be difficult for me. You sold me, you subjugated me. Hashem chashov l'toiva. It was really midas harachamim. This is the way I became the viceroy of Egypt. This is the way I became lifleiter gedolah for entire Klal Yisrael. Says the Medrash, if this is something which could be recognized by Yosef HaTzadik in his doir, kal v'choima, what we will all realize when we hear those eternal words, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami. The words Nachamu, Nachamu mean that Atem chashavtem l'ro. You thought things were difficult. You thought the life was terribly difficult. Hashem chashov l'toiva. It's really midas harachamim. It's designed to bring you close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's designed to bring the geula. Nachamu, Nachamu Ami. Yoimar Elokeichem. That's what you will say about the midas hadin. What appears to us now as midas hadin which manifests itself in so many ways throughout the world, throughout the Jewish world. Nachamu, Nachamu Ami. One day, the day will come speedily in our days when we'll recognize that this is all Hashem's kindness. In the Haftarah, on Tisha B'Av itself, we say those wonderful words from Yirmiyahu Hanavi. Haskel v'yodoya oisi, ki ani Hashem oiseh chesed u'tzedakah. It says the Rashba in the Chidushay HaGadolos and Brochos. A mere mortal who doesn't contemplate and think deeply can be excused for thinking that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's midas hadin, when we see the wrath and the anger, the raw anger of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you can be excused for thinking that this is only midas hadin. It says Yirmiyahu Hanavi, Haskel, think deeply, contemplate well, understand v'yodoya oisi. Then you will really understand HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And what will you understand then when you think deeply? Ki ani Hashem, everything that I do is midas harachamim, oiseh chesed u'tzedakah. Everything that I do is chesed and tzedakah. As we go through this difficult phase of Bein HaMeitzarim, as we go through difficult phases in our own lives, we have to know that it's all for our good. When things are difficult, it's out of Hashem's fatherly love. He's doing it for our sake. The Smag writes in his Sefer HaMitzvahs that there's a mitzvah for a yid to be matzik olav zadin. We have nisyonis in life. There's a mitzvah in the Torah to understand that Hashem is doing it because it's for our ultimate good. Like a father sometimes has to hit his son, but it's only Yasir Ishes Benoi. Hashem is lekecho me'asreko. Says the Smag, I darshan this parabim. I want Klal Yisrael to know this. We're allowed to darshan it parabim as well. Yasir Ishes Benoi, Hashem lekecho me'asreko. I've mentioned this before. There's a very famous pasuk in Shir Shirim, and it's become famous with a niggun as well. Im timtzu es doidi. If you find, Klal Yisrael says, if you go out and you find a HaKadosh Baruch Hu as doidi, my loving uncle, what should you tell him? Matagidu loy, shechoilas ava oni, that I love HaKadosh Baruch Hu so much. What the song doesn't bring out is the context of this pasuk. Where's this pasuk written? In Shir Shirim. It says, Shlomo HaMelech, Matzauni ha-shoimrim ha-soivivim bo'ir. There are shoimrim, there are goyim, there are circumstances in this world which come upon a person. Hikuni, they hit me. Patzauni, they leave me with wounds. And at that point, how do we react? How does Klal Yisrael react when HaKadosh Baruch Hu hits us? Asoran Nisyonis Nisnas Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu was our father, says Reb Chaim Volozhin. He was the trailblazer who taught us how to react to Nisyonis. Hashem sent him Nisyonis. V'omad b'kulam. He accepted them in the understanding that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends me Nisyonis for my good. At the time of Ikuni Pitzauni, that's the time when we say, Im timtzu es doidi. I appreciate it comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's everlasting love. And the purpose of this all is shechoilas avon, to know that we love HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Hashem loves us. Mi tencha ka'ach li, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is so close to Klal Yisrael, particularly at the time of Bein HaMeitzarim, when the Romans broke into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. They saw the Kruvim, Urim zeh bozeh, in a display of love to Klal Yisrael at such a difficult time, because it really comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love. Let us not lose sight of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love as we go through the times of Bein HaMeitzarim and as we prepare ourselves for the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days. Wherever Rabbi say, we have the zchus to learn together the sugya, the beautiful sugya of the dinim of Rechitza on Tisha B'Av, on Yom Kippur, on other Ta'anesim. I don't know what Yedidi Reb Shlomo got through in his Shia, so we'll try and do justice to this sugya, although it's a very, very big sugya. We're coming up for Tisha B'Av, which starts on Motzei Shabbos, and whereas the Suda on Shoshudas, we're told we can have a Suda Shloime b'Shaitoi, Shabbos, but when it comes to Shkia bin Hashmoshes, then you can't eat. Shabbos, so to speak, stands down. The mitzvah of Achila is until Shkia. Once it comes to Shkia, then it's already Suffolk night, and there's no eating anymore. On the other hand, the poskim discuss, what about taking off shoes? Taking off shoes, you don't need to take off shoes at Shkia. You can keep your shoes on, even from Shkia until night. What's the difference between shoes and eating? Says the Emek Brocha, there might be other Pirushim, says Emek Brocha. Tisha B'Av has an interesting blend of two dinim. There's one chapter in Hilchos Tisha B'Av, which is the dinim of Avelis, in which we're doimer to an oven. And there's the other one, which is dinim of a tanis. During the year, you can have a tanis, a Yom Kippur is a tanis, it's no Avelis. Rachmana litzlan is an oven, yes, dinim of Avelis, yes, no dinim of a tanis. Tisha B'Av, both of these come together at the same time. Says the Emek Brocha, we have a few minutes at the end of Shabbos, Bein Hashmoshes. Is it a contradiction to the dinim of Shabbos to conduct myself for these few minutes with the dinim of Tisha B'Av? Says the Emek Brocha, it depends which dinim of Tisha B'Av. The dinim of not eating on Tisha B'Av, the dinim of Tanis. Tanis, although you're not allowed to fast the whole of Shabbos, but you don't need to eat the whole of Shabbos. So if for those few minutes from Shkia until night, I won't eat, and I won't eat because of the dinim of the Tanis of Tisha B'Av, that's not a stira to Shabbos. I ate the whole of Shabbos, so these few minutes at the end of Shabbos, I won't eat. That's not a stira to Shabbos. But, says the Emek Brocha, changing my shoes, changing shoes, there's no changing your shoes on a regular Tanis, on a Shabbos of a Tanis. The changing of the shoes is in Avelis. Novel changes his shoes. The Kedusha of Shabbos doesn't allow Avelis even for 20 minutes or half an hour or an hour on Shabbos. No Avelis at all. Therefore, says the Emek Brocha, this stage in time between Shkia and night on Motzei Shabbos, beginning of Tisha B'Av, when it comes to eating, we're not allowed to eat, because this is not a contradiction to the Kedusha Shabbos. It's not a contradiction, to the Kedusha Shabbos to conduct myself for these few minutes with the dinim of Tanis. But to conduct myself with the dinim of Avelis, that's not allowed on Shabbos at all. And therefore, until it's dark, until it's night, you don't change your shoes. Some people change their shoes at home once it's dark, and then they go to shul. Other people go to shul with their shoes on, and then there's Baruch Hu, and then they change their shoes, but they don't change at Shkia. So far, which is what's relevant to this coming Tisha B'Av. Maybe Zoichet should already be changed into a Yom Tov before Tisha B'Av ever comes. We want to learn together the dinim, beautiful dinim of Rechitza on Tisha B'Av. And the important point that we want to understand is whether all the dinim of the Issa of Rechitza on Tisha B'Av stem from the dinim of Tanis or stem from the dinim of Avelis. This is the big question. So let us see a Gemara here in Pesachim, Daf Nun Daladom and Beis. Rebbe Elazar says a din. Famous din of Rebbe Elazar. Asa loyla adam sheyoshit etzboi b'mayim b'Tisha B'Av. You're not allowed to put even your little finger into water on Tisha B'Av. Like it's also on Yom Kippur, it's also on Tisha B'Av. Shkoyach, Reb Shlomo and whoever the shluchim who show us the Gemara in front of us, this is the din of Rebbe Elazar.
Dr. Lederreich,
Dr. Lederreich, thank you very much indeed. It's extremely beneficial for the Shia every time again. Very much appreciated. The Gemara asks a kasha. Meisve, a kasha from a brayso on the din of Rebbe Elazar. Ein bein Tisha B'Av v'tanis tzibur. What's the difference between Tisha B'Av and tanis tzibur? Ela shazeh also das b'asiyas malacha. A tanis as an issa of malacha. V'zeh muter b'asiyas malacha. Tisha B'Av is muter b'malacha. B'mokim shenoagu. There's different places. Some places have a minig. They don't do malacha on Tisha B'Av. Others have a minig. But they do. Where the minig is, it's permissible. But the Chachamim didn't forbid malacha on Tisha B'Av. Why? Why is there difference between tanis tzibur and Tisha B'Av? Says Magen Avraham. Depends what the purpose of the tanis is. This tanis tzibur that the Bryce is discussing is a tanis tzibur when we need geshamim. The Mishnah tells us that if there's no rain in Eretz Yisrael after Sukkot, so there's the first stage of tanesim. If that helps, good. If it doesn't help, then you get a stricter level of tanesim. That's what's known as tanis tzibur in the Lashon of the Gemara. A tanis tzibur, the purpose is that you should come together in order to daven. So Chazal, as part of the tanis tzibur, they forbade malacha. Mashenk in Tisha B'Av, it's also a tanis tzibur. It's a tanis tzibur for a different reason. Not in order that to convince HaKadosh Baruch Hu to give us rain. It's a tanis tzibur because we're upset that unfortunately we went through such a terrible. We're still suffering from the Churban Beis HaMikdash. But because the purpose isn't in order to get us to come to daven, therefore there's, as far as the Chachamim are concerned, no issa of malacha on Tisha B'Av. That's the Bryce. Says the Gemara. Halachol devreim, but legabo all the other dinim. Zeva zeh shavin, Tisha B'Av and tanis tzibur exactly the same. V'ilu gabo tanis tzibur tanya. It says in the Bryce, "Kshamru asa rachitza lo amru elo kol gufay." Av upon yod v'raglov, lo, there's no issa of upon yod v'raglov. That's a kasha on Rebbe Elazar because the Bryce says that Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, Tisha B'Av and tanis tzibur have the same dinim, and Rebbe Elazar says an issa of even sheyoshet et spoi b'mayim. That's the Gemara's kasha on Rebbe Elazar. Amar of Papa that legaba the kulas of the shar tanesim kule ketani. The Bryce is not discussing the fact that we might have kulas in tanesim and a chumrah in Tisha B'Av. That's the Gemara. Toisus comes with a moyer dike kasha. It says Toisus. Can you run it down, please, a little bit? Because I can't see it because of there's some sign over here on my screen. A little bit further, if you don't mind. A little bit further down. Can you put it a bit further down, please? There we are. Beautiful. Even if you didn't have the din of Rebbe Elazar who said that there's an Isalohish that's boy b'mayim. Anyway, says Toisus, the Gemara could ask the kasha anyway. Why? Even if you wouldn't say the chiddush of Rebbe Elazar of putting your little finger in, the chalapach kol gufoy is asa afilu b'tzayna. The whole body is asa even in cold water. So anyway, Tisha B'Av is more chomor le'inyan kol gufoy b'tzayna. So the Gemara could have asked the kasha that even without Rebbe Elazar, who's in Meir, there's anyway a steer to this brayso because the brayso says that Tisha B'Av and Shar Tanesim are exactly the same, and says Toisus, we know that Tisha B'Av has an issa of kol gufa b'tzayna, and the Tanesim is mutter kol gufa b'tzayna. That's Toisus kasha. The Briskerov comes and is safer to emphasize Toisus kasha. Says the Briskerov, no, if not for Rebbe Elazar, the Gemara's got no kasha. Why? Says the Briskerov. The Brisa, which the Gemara brings in Pesachim, says that Ein Bein Tisha B'Av letanis tzibur elo shazeh muter b'asiyas malacha v'zeh oser b'asiyas malacha. Says the Brisker of this Brisa discussion in Dinei Tanis. There's a Tanis of Tisha B'Av. There's a Tanis of Tanis tzibur for Geshamim, in the dinim of the Tanis, they're the same, except for the fact that in the dinim of the Tanis, one has an Issa Malacha in all that you should have him because of the Tanis of the Gshamim, and the other one, Tisha B'Av, doesn't have it. Says the Brisker of the fact that Tisha B'Av has an Issa of Kol Gufoy B'Tzoinen L'Chol Adeyas, that's nothing to do with Dini Tanis. Why does Tisha B'Av have an Issa of Kol Gufoy B'Tzoinen? Says the Brisker of. That's a din of Avelis. An Ovel is also Kol Gufoy B'Tzoinen. The Bryce is discussing Tisha B'Av and Sham Tanesim only vis-a-vis the dinim of Tanis. There happens to be another din that Tisha B'Av at the same time also has a din of Avelis, which makes an Issa of Kol Gufoy B'Tzoinen. That's not relevant to the Bryce at all. So the Gemara couldn't ask a kasha. Where's the Gemara ask a kasha? On Rabbi Elazar says, Asal Adam Shiyushit et Spoy B'Mayim on Tisha B'Av. That's not Medina Avelis. Novel doesn't have this din. So why does Tisha B'Av have this din of Asal Shiyushit et Spoy B'Mayim? Because it's a strict Tanis. So it's a din Medina Tanis. If there's a din Medina Tanis, Asal Adam Shiyushit et Spoy B'Mayim Midin the Tanis, then we have a gross kasha from the Brisa over here on the din of Rebbe Elazar. Ad kan divrei the Brisker of. Now let us have a look. The Shuz Kol HaKol HaKodesh Hazeh in the Gemara in Tanks, the Yud Gimel. The Gemara says, Omar Rafram. Rafram says a din. Omar Rafram Bapapa, Omar Rafchista. Kol Shehu Mishum Ovel, Kegoin Tisha B'Av Ovel, Asa Bein Bechamin Bein Betzoyin. Rafram says that Tisha B'Av and an Ovel have a din in common. That what? That Tisha B'Av has a din of Avelis, and that makes it Issa Bein Bechamin Bein Betzoyin. The Ran on the spot makes a big aura. This Brisa, this din of Rafram, seems to suggest that Tisha B'Av has the same dinim as an oval in Rechitza. Kol shehu mishum oval, Tisha B'Av oval. Frek the Ram, it's not true, because the Gemara in Psachim says Rebbe Elazar says that Tisha B'Av has an additional din. Even etzboi b'mayim is osa, like the Brisker of says. Why? Mitzad the dinim of the Tanis. So the Ram says, fair enough. The Rafram is discussing the dinim of Avelis. Mitzad the din of Avelis, Tisha B'Av has the same din as Ovel. Besides that, there happens to be another din that Tisha B'Av anyway is also even Oishlet's boy b'mayim, even in cold water, a finger. Why? Because it's a Chomer Dikatanis. That's the Ram. L'chayra, Tzorchin Gadol. Because then, if that's the case, then it makes no difference at all what Rafram tells me. Rafram tells me that there's an Issa of Avelis which forbids Rechitza on Tisha B'Av. And that din of Rechitza of an Ovel has a limited scope of an Issa. At the same time that we know that anyway, there's a much more Chomedik din, even Oishnitz Boy B'Mayim on Tisha B'Av. So what practical difference does it make? What's Rafram telling me? That there's a din of Avelis which forbids Rechitza on Tisha B'Av. So, from the Lamdon, I'll say, Rafram's telling me a lomdus. There's no nafkim in a lomdus. He's telling me a lomdus. Kol shu mishum ovel, Tisha B'Av ovel. You should know that the din of Avelis. It makes no practical difference because there's anyway a din of a tanis of Tisha B'Av which forbids even its boy b'mayim. Nicht das Geschmack. Besser kann man sagen, that there's kam of a kam nafkiminas. The Ramban in Teres Adam, he says nafkimina in Surah Mafsekes. Surah Mafsekes is not yet Tisha B'Av, but it has some dinim like Tisha B'Av, i.e., the dinim of Avelis of Tisha B'Av have already started, which is why he's sitting on the floor. But the dinim of Tanis haven't started. You're allowed to eat. It says the Ramban, during Surah Mafsekes, am I allowed to wash? Says the Ramban, the Issa of Rechitza that there is on Tisha B'Av itself, because of the din of the Tanis, doesn't apply during Sulam of seconds. I'm allowed to eat, so I'm allowed to put my finger into cold water. But the Issa, like an oval, that applies already in Sulam of seconds. So just like an oval sits on the floor, and an oval is not allowed to wash b'chamim, that then applies already in Sulam of seconds. Nafkamina number 1. Nafkamina number 2 says the Beishav Dovid and Tzvi and other Achronim, and Nafkamina in a cotton shenis gadol. Next year, we're going to have a Tisha B'Av on Shabbos. Halavai, it should be Yom Tov already. But in a year when there's a Tanis is Chal on Shabbos. So obviously, there's no Tisha B'Av on Shabbos at all. It gets pushed off to Sunday. What's the din for a bar mitzvah boy? He becomes a mitzvah on the Sunday, on the Tisha B'Av Nidcha. Does he have the dinim of Tisha B'Av? So the Achrayim say that it depends which dinim. That means the din Tanis of Tisha B'Av, Chazal removed the Tanis and they transplanted the Tanis from Tisha B'Av till Yud. So this, if he becomes a Godel on Tisha B'Av, he has the dinim of the Tanis. He has the dinim of the Tanis. Sorry, yes. Masha Ein the dinim of Avelis. The dinim of Avelis, that is not transmitted from the Shabbos to the Sunday because it's only a tashlum in the dinim of Avelis, and therefore the dinim of Avelis won't be relevant on the Sunday. Another nafkamina. A third nafkamina will be in the discussion of the time between Shkia and night on the end of Shabbos, Habalin L'Tova. So we say that according to the Emek Bracha, the dinim of Tanis, they start already, but not the dinim of Avelos. So therefore, the dinim of Rachitza as well. We'll have the dinim of Tanis, not the dinim of Avelos. Void kam of a kamanaf kiminis. I don't want to leave this point of the Lomdus out, and I want to move on to another Nakuda. Tosfos, however, asks the Kasha on the Gemara in Pesachim. Why didn't Tosfos want to say such a beautiful teretz like the Briskerov? The Gemara in Pesachim says, Rabbi Elazar, Omer Rabbi Elazar, Asaloi l'adam sheyoshid et tzpoi b'mayim b'tisha b'av, k'derech she'asaloi yoshid et tzpoi b'yom kippur. Says the Briskerov, and he brings it from the Rambam in Perek Hey Milchos Tanias, Halacha Yud, and the same in the Ram, that this din of Rabbi Elazar is a din midinei Tanis. And if it's a din midinei Tanis, then the Gemara's got a good kasha on him from the Brisa, which says, Ein Bein Tisha B'Av Tanis Tzibur. What did Tosfos ask a kasha from the din that anyway is also called Gufa B'Tzvi? Why didn't he want to say like the Briskerov? The teretz is Zeya Poshet. Tosfos holds not like the Briskerov, not like the Rambam, not like the Rambam. Tosfos holds when Rabbi Elazar says, Asaloi l'adam sheyoshid et tzpoi b'mayim b'tisha b'av, that's midin Avelos. Rabbi Elazar says, K'derech she'asaloi yoshid et tzpoi b'yom kippur. He's not giving the reason for it. He's making a comparison in din. The dinim are the same, but for two different reasons. Yom Kippur is because it's Yom Kippur, a chomor dikar tanis. Tisha B'Av has a din, you can't put your finger into water. Why? Because it's Avelis. You'll ask me, general Avelim are allowed to put their finger into water? Teretz is Poshet. Says the Ritva, because you can't compare Ovel de Yochid and Avelis de Rabim. There's an Ovel de Yochid because he lost his father. He doesn't have an issa to put his finger into cold water. Avelis de Rabim, the whole of Klal Yisrael has an Avelis. That's a much more chomodika Avelis. That's much more chomor. And therefore, that Avelis, which is much more chomor, is also even Rishtet Tzpoi B'Mayim. If that's how Tosfos and the Ritva learn the din of Rabbi Elazar, the Gemara asks a kasha that the Brisa says, Ein Bein Tanis Tzibur and Tisha B'Av. So why didn't the Gemara say, no, Rabbi Elazar is a different din. Rabbi Elazar is Midinei Avelis. So according to Tosfos and the Ritva, you see that the Gemara wasn't prepared to say this beautiful shtickle Torah of the Briskerov. The Gemara held if the Brisa says Ein Bein Tisha B'Av le Tanis Tzibur, it's not only legaba the dinim of Tanis, it's for all dinim of Tisha B'Av. So if you see from the Gemara's kasha that the Gemara held that there can't be a difference between Tisha B'Av and Tanis Tzibur for any din, even mitzad the dinim of Avelos, then Tosfos got a gewaltige kasha. Why did the Gemara have to ask kasha on Rebbe Elazar? Even without Rebbe Elazar, our Gemara in Tanis says Rafram that Tisha B'Av anyway has an issa of kol gufa b'tzonim, and Tanis Tzibur doesn't have that. So Tosfos, from their understanding in the din of Rebbe Elazar, that the issa lo'ishid etzboi b'mayim is not midin Tanis, but midin avelis derabim, Tosfos then had a gewaltige kasha on the Gemara that you don't need Rebbe Elazar to ask this kasha of the Gemara. How do we see this shitta of Tosfos and the Ritva? In a number of places. Firstly, the Ritva by us in Tanis speaks out explicitly not like the Rambam and the Ran. The Rambam and the Ran learn that the din of L'hoishid etzboi b'mayim is a din in Tanis. Like Yom Kippur has a Tanis and it has a din it's also to put your finger in water. So too the Tanis of Tisha B'Av has the same din. The Ritva says Mefurish, no. There's Dinei Avelos and there's an Oval de Yochid and an Oval de Rabbin, which is Mocham. The Ritva repeats himself in a number of places. The one which is most explicit is the Ritva in Moed Katan Daf Chafalef Amud Aleph, wherein the Ritva says we have two Gemaras which say that an Oval is Asa B'Talmud Torah. There's two people who are Asa B'Talmud Torah. An Oval is Asa B'Talmud Torah, and Tisha B'Av is Asa B'Talmud Torah. The Gemara tells us Mefurish that in a case situation of an Oval who is Rabbim Tzrichim Loi, there's a Rabbim who need to be taught dinim, and he's an Oval. Rabbim Tzrichim Loi, he's allowed to learn and teach Torah. Does this dispensation, does this heter apply only to an Oval or also to Tisha B'Av? Says the Ritva, I don't know. Perhaps this heter of Rabbim Tzrichim Loi only applies to an Oval, and perhaps it doesn't apply to Tisha B'Av. Why? Says the Ritva, because Tisha B'Av is more chomer. Why? Because it's an Avelis Derabim. How do I know that Tisha B'Av in its dinim of Avelis is more chomer? Because I see that the regular Oval only has an issa of kol gufay and doesn't have an issa of betzoinen. And Tisha B'Av has an issa of asal adam sheyoshit etzboi b'mayim. So I see that Avelis derabim is more chomer, and maybe it'll be asa even by Rabbim Tzrichim Loi. According to the Briskerov, the Rambam, the Ran, they could never say such a thing. You know why Tisha B'Av has a chumrah le'inyan that's asal hoishid etzboi b'mayim? That's midinei Tanis, because it's a chomer diga Tanis, like Yom Kippur, like Rebbe Elazar says, kederach she'asal hoishid etzboi b'Yom Kippur. The din that you're not allowed to learn Torah, that's not a din in Yom Kippur, you're allowed to learn Torah. So why isn't Tisha B'Av asal b'Talmud Torah midinei Avelos? There's no source, according to the Ran and the Rambam, to say that in the dinim of Avelos, Tisha B'Av is more chomer than Shara Tanis. So obviously, if the din is that a normal Oval is mutter by Rabbim Tzrichim Loi, according to the Rambam and the Ran, it's pashut, but the same will apply by Tisha B'Av as well. He's the one who's able to say that perhaps Tisha B'Av in the dinim of Avelos is more chomer than the regular Oval. Now that we have this clear, Be'ez Hashem, we can move on to try and veremphasize kasha of Rabbi Kvege and Gilin Hashas, a kasha which is mamash maraf saniger, and mamash needs a groise pshat. We have our Gemara here in Tanis, Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. Omar Rafram says, Tisha B'Av and Oval is also been bechamim b'im betzoinen. The Gemara qualifies this to say, Hilchos, what's the halacha? Oval also luchitz kol gufay b'im bechamim b'im betzoinen kol shiva. But Ponav Yada V'Raglov, B'chamin Asa B'Tzoinen Mutter. That's the memra of the Halacha L'Maisa, which the Ran and others learn is not a steerer to the din of Rafram. Rafram also agrees this. We move on in the Gemara, and we see the Gemara asks a kasha. The Gemara asks a kasha, Toshma, a kasha from a brisa. In Gemara in Tainis Afyutim, Kasha Amru, that which it says on a Tanis Tzvi, also rachitza, that which it says it's also rachitza. Lo Amru Elokol Gufay. Avapon of the Raglu Muta. Chena of HaMeitzarim Munut of Oven. My lava kulu, but my asking, Ileba B'cham upon the Raglu Mishor. V'Omer of Sheishes, Ovel also Loishlitz Boy B'cham and Elab B'tzoinen. So the Gemara has established that this price is talking about B'tzoinen. So what? What's the Gemara asking a kasha? So Rashi has his pshat. When the Gemara says this kasha from Tzoinen is asking a kasha on Tanis Tzibur, that we see from this brisa that the Tanis Tzibur has an issa of kol gufay b'tzoinen. That's how Rashi learns. And then it's a kasha on the din of Rafram. Beautiful kasha. Tosfos doesn't like this pshat of Rashi for a simple reason, maybe other reasons. The kasha before in the Gemara is not asking on Rafram's din of Tanis Tzibur. It's asking on Rafram's din of Tisha. The next kasha is again on Rafram's din of Tisha. Generally, the Gemara will club together the kashas on one part of Rafram and club together the kashas on another part. So Tosfos doesn't want to learn that kasha 1 and kasha 3 are on the din of Tanis Tzibur of Rafram, and kasha number 2 in the middle from the brisa is on the din of Tanis Tzibur, like Rashi. So Tosfos learns what's the Gemara's kasha. The Gemara says Elalav, the brisa is talking about Tzainon, and it's a kasha on the din of Rafram. That what? That Rafram said that there's an issa of Tzainon on Tisha B'Av. And what do you see in the brisa? That the brisa forbids Ponim Yad V'Raglav. Frek the Gilin Hashas Rikvega can't see a kasha at all. The Gemara itself says Hilchos that this issa of Tzainon is only an issa of, says the Gemara, Kol Gufo, Hilchos Ha'Ovel Asa Richas Kol Gufo Bein Mecham and Bein Mitzaina, Avapon of Yad V'Raglav, B'Tzainon Muta. So the din of Rafram and the din of the Hilchos is exactly the same as the brisa. So what do you want? What's the kasha? Gilin Hashas of Reb Vegas doesn't understand. According to Tosfos, there's no kasha at all. The brisa is not a steer to Rafram. The teretz is Rabbi Kiva learned the din of Rafram is not a steer to the Hilchos in the Gemara. Why did he learn that way? Because that's the way the Ran and the Rambam learned the din of Rafram. There's not a steer. But according to Tosfos and the Ritva, they learn that the din of Asal Adam Sheishet Boy B'Mayim is also within Avelis. And if it's also within Avelis, then it's clear that Rafram, when he says, Kol Shum Shum Avel, Ken Tishvav Avel Asa, Bein B'Cham and Bein Mitzaynon, he must be forbidding Tishvav and Avel, even Laishet Boy B'Mayim, and there's no difference between the two of them. The Ran can make the difference between the two of them, because he holds that the din of Laishet Boy B'Mayim is a completely separate din. But Tosfos and the Ritva, they hold Laishet Boy B'Mayim is a din midinei Ovel. And if that's the case, then the din of Rafram, which says Tisha B'Av and Ovel is Asa, must be even Laishet Boy, and he can't agree to the Hilchos of the Gemara. If that's the case, then the Gemara's got a Gevaltige kasha from the brisa on the din of Rafram, even if the brisa is in accordance with the din of the Gemara of the Hilchos. But it's not a stira, but it's al-kaponim a stira to the din of Rafram at the din of beginning of the Gemara. From Tosfos Lemaisa, that Tosfos in Tainis Yud Gimel goes l'shetosayim Sachem Nun Dalet do a chaylik on the shtickle Torah of the Briskerov. So we have one shit of the Ran and the Rambam and the Briskerov, and a separate shit of the Ritva in many places, and Tosfos Beinim Psachim and Beinim Tainis disagree with the Briskerov Shtickle Torah, and there could be an nafkamina between these Rishonim in the various nafkaminas that we explained before in the Shtickle Torah of the Briskerov. I asked Mechili from the Tzibur, I have an important thing that I have to leave the shir now at 1:45. Maybe she'll help him, at some other time to continue. B'shar tova u'mutzlacha.